During this heated elections, which we know that everyone is busy going out to vote because we know the importance of this specific elections, I wanted to mention one important point which I think is relevant for all Jewish people, and that is, in the end of the day, the amount of Jewish votes that we have in America is almost infinitesimal, especially since most of them do not live in the swing states. Everyone should go out to vote, and it's definitely a mitzvah, and you're supposed to do what you need to do, because it has to do everything about us. But you know, the power of Klal Yisrael is in the mouth. We have the koach of tefillah. Even though in numbers we might be small, but there might be in numbers, but in the amount of the power that lies behind each one of us, and eichut as opposed to kamut, and quality as opposed to quantity, we are endless, the amount that we can do with the power of our mouth, of our tefillah. And therefore I wanted to just present an interesting question, and that is, are we permitted to go ahead and daven for Trump to win? Can we go ahead and daven for him to win? Would it make sense to daven for a goy? Of course, it's not a goy that we necessarily look up to at all, especially his standards and his morals are not exactly something that is something to write about. But is it permitted to go ahead and daven, to pray for him? The power of our tefillahs are, like I said, limitless. We have the extended capabilities to be able to get to anywhere. Is that permitted? So it's interestingly enough, I received a similar question a couple times from Gerim, a person who was a convert, and he wanted to know if he was permitted to daven for his father. His father, who was a goy, non-Jew, but he was sick, and they wanted to know if they were permitted. It was asked by a daughter, and one time by his son, and other people, if they're permitted to go ahead and daven for one of the parents, because in the end of the day, they're goyim. Do we daven for the refuah shleima that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help out a goy? Is that appropriate to do? A very similar question which needs to be addressed. And you know, lo and behold, we have it already in our parshat in front of us with Avraham Avinu, that we know it says, Vayigash Avraham v'yomer ha'afti sped tzadikim rasha. We know that Avraham Avinu went and davened for Sdom. He went out of his way to daven for Sdom. A, they were goyim, and B, they were Rishayim, even worse than that. And still, HaKadosh Baruch Hu went out of his way to tell Avraham Avinu about Sdom in order that he will go ahead and daven for them. As the Ramban brings down, Avram, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, am I going to cover this up from Avraham Avinu? Says the Ramban these words, Nachmanides, I'm not going to cover it up from him. Ki yormu dorot habayim. I don't want the future generations to say that I didn't tell him. And how can this tzaddik who is sitting neighbors together with this city of Sdom and Amorah, and he didn't end up davening v'lo richem v'lo yitpalel lehem klal? It's not beseder. He didn't go ahead and daven for them, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu seems to be ma'aritz. He seems to praise the tefillot of Avraham Avinu. He seemed to think it was appropriate to do that. And the truth is, the Midrash in Parshat Lech Lecha says a similar idea. That over there, it brings the back and forth of Avraham Avinu with HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying that you can't destroy a city, but at the same time you have to do mishpat, you have to do the proper justice, and if you do mishpat, if you don't do justice, then you'll save a city, back and forth. And over there it actually says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu praises Avraham Avinu, and he says that on you I've said shemen sason mi chavarecha. I've put you above all your friends, just like shemen, just like oil. Of course, we know rises above the water that it is poured inside of. It's above. And therefore we say about Avraham Avinu that you are like shemen, you are like oil that goes above everybody else. That's the song that we sing by Bar Yochai, by Yoshem Bar Yochai also. And like Ba'omer, shemen sason mi chavarecha is the same idea, the same concept behind it, is that we know that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was above his generation. So too we say the same thing about Avraham Avinu. But why? Not only because of Akedat Yitzchak, not because of Lech Lecha. Says this Midrash, the reason why is because you care about everyone. Even for Sdom, you went ahead and davened for them. You cared, as the pasuk, as the Midrash says over there, that it says this lashon, you don't want the Rishayim to die in your matzdik all my creations, and therefore I am going to go ahead and put you over and beyond other people. Good. So that is a very nice idea, concept to seem to say that one could daven for someone else. That was Avraham Avinu. We know by Elisha the great Navi, davened for a person named Naaman also, that he was sick, he got tzara'at all over him, and he went and davened him, and he told him how to make sure that he would become better, and he ended up taking care of him also. Elisha also took care of Naaman. He made a tremendous Kiddush Hashem, and he himself became a Ger Toshav. He tried to do his best to become as good a person as he could. Naaman, it was a Kiddush Hashem. We also know by Mordechai, he went out of his way to save Achashverosh, even though it was a Rashi, it was good for nothing. But in the end of the day, I don't have to tell you, we all know the story that happened in the Megillah, that as a result of that, that was the turning point, Balayla Hahu, that ended up getting Mordechai on top to be able to go ahead and vanquish Haman. So it seems to be that we found a number of times where it seems to be, yes, appropriate, at least in specific circumstances, to daven, even for a goy, and maybe even sometimes for someone who's not the greatest goyim of all. Listen to the words of the Netziv in his introduction to the Sefer Ha'emek Davar. In the introduction to his Pirush on Chumash, he explains that this is called Sefer HaYashar. Sefer Breshit is known as Sefer HaYashar, the book of the just, the book of the righteous, not just the righteous, of the straight. And he says, why? Because the Pasuk says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Tzadik v'Yashar Hu. Hashem is a Tzadik v'Yashar. What's the difference? Tzadik is one who does everything according to the letter of the law. He does everything appropriately. During the Churban Beit HaMikdash, during the second temple, everybody were tzaddikim. These are the words of the Netziv 150 years ago. Everybody was tzaddikim. They kept all 613 mitzvot. They were learning Torah. They were Beseder Gamor. They were okay. They were tzaddikim. But Yesharim, they weren't. He said they were choshed zeh b'zeh. They were suspect one of the other. They didn't treat each other appropriately. Of course, we know the expression of sinat chinam, that they weren't ever present about the other person. They only were focused on themselves and not someone else. As opposed to, he says, the Avot HaKadoshim, the power of Sefer HaYashar, of all of Sefer Breshit, is coming to teach us this lesson of being not only a tzaddik, like Noach tzaddik b'Yershav, but also a yashar. But you also have to go beyond a Noach, not just be like Noach who was a tzaddik, but you have to be a yashar, like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And what is the pinnacle example that he brings that Avram Avinu was a yashar? He says, as we find in our parshat in front of us, that Avram Avinu went and davened, he prayed for Sdom. He went out of his way, and he says over there, even though he didn't like Sdom, he wasn't a big fan of Sdom, he wasn't fond of the people. There were people that were going in Mored and Neged HaKadosh Baruch Hu. His whole epitome of his life of Avram Avinu was to bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu down into this world. And they were doing everything counter to that. But even so, he was called a yashar for going ahead and davening for them, because it seemed to be the appropriate thing to do at the time, and that was something that he was supposed to go out of his way. He brings an example of Yitzchak, that he also helped out Avimelech in order to help him out in their difficult situation. But Kopanim, we see from here again this incredible phenomenon, this fantastic idea that maybe sometimes it's not only permitted, but even maybe appropriate to go ahead and daven for a goy. And again, in extreme examples, could be even in the sake of a Rasha. Now, this is before Matan Torah, maybe. This happened before the giving of the Torah, but still to go ahead and daven for Rasha before Matan Torah is a raya that at least after Matan Torah, that one is permitted to go ahead and daven for them. Let me quote, and this will finish up this year, from a Yechavedat. Yechavedat is the great Rav Ovadia. Today is his yortzeit. In the end of Chelik Vav, in Yechavedat, the last tshuva, in Siman Samech over there, he was asked the question which I mentioned previously of a ger davening for his parent. Is a ger permitted to go ahead and daven for his parent? The person also wanted to say Kaddish for his parent, and again, in the end of the day, he's a goy, and we know a ger is katan shenolad, he's disconnected from his parents, so to speak, that he's not necessarily considered related to the parents because he became a new creation. So maybe he should not be davening for a goy, or maybe Kaddish is inappropriate. That was what was asked. Not going into all the details of the tshuva, more or less, he brings from Siman Kufnu Chet that over there it says someone who's an Ovid of a Zara, if you're a doctor, you don't save a person who is a goy. We don't save goyim when they are in a bad situation, because we're worried that they're going to go out and do worse things, they're going to do things that are bad. But, and quickly I should amend what it says there, many of the Mefarshim learn it's referring to an Ovid of Avodah, someone who is doing idolatry. An Ovid of Avodah is someone who's going against the Kadosh Baruch Hu, someone who's Mored b'Malchut, who's going against the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore it says, why should you go ahead and be merapeoto? Look, we found that the Rambam was in Egypt and he did a refuah for many Ishmaelim, many Arabs of the time. He was the king, he was the Sultan's doctor. He was privy to the palace, and he was the doctor over there, and he was taking care of many Yishmaelim. How could he do such a thing? They should have a kar tov for us for everything they're doing to us. They should have some kar tov. How could he do such a thing? Because Yishmaelim, we know, are not oved avodah zarah. They are not adulterers. They just hijacked the Jewish religion, but they only believe in one God, Allah. They believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Allah refers to Echad, which means one. That they believe only in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So too, we can say with Christians. Now, Christians, I'm not going to get into. It's a big discussion. If they are considered oved avodah zarah, for us it would be oved avodah zarah. For them, if it is or not, is not the place over here. But clearly, in the Western world, the majority of everyone is not proper Christian, meaning they do not worship any God per se. As the Mishnah says in Avodah Zarah, they're minag avoteim beyadeim. They're just doing kind of like going through the motions. Everybody likes to throw eggs at windows, so they celebrate Halloween or to get a few candies on the side. You want to have a tree on Xmas so you can get some presents underneath it and give it out to your kids. But it has nothing to do with anything religious. Santa is the same letters of Satan, and if they knew what they were talking about, they wouldn't even celebrate the whole holiday in the first place. Easter is fun to have some colored eggs, etc., etc. Everything that they're doing over there is completely just for the fun of it, to bring some flavor into their life in between their vacations and their work that they do. So that's why they do it. It has nothing to do with any type of religious activity. And therefore, when we even daven for one of the goyim in America, such as the aforementioned goy that we are discussing, who is running for president, he is definitely not an oved avodah zarah. It would even be, he's a little bit, he always talks about the God of Israel. He seems to have a little bit of a connection. And therefore, we see sometimes even going to the kotel with a kippah on his head, going. But al koparim, the idea behind it is nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that the only time that we find an isur is when someone is going and being mored against the Kadosh Baruch Hu. He's doing something negative towards the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore we find many places where it would be permitted. He brings from Rav Atiyah that also has a tshuva, of a similar tshuva of a child davening for his father, and he added another factor. Hakarat tov, you should have to have basic gratitude for your father, for your mother, for bringing you into this world, and therefore, no matter what we say about it, proper gratitude is yes, to daven for them, to help them out, to be able to take care of them, to abide to their needs in certain situations that is necessary, and therefore it is permitted for those reasons to go ahead and help you. He adds the factor of shalom malchut. Also, for the sake of malchut, one is permitted to go ahead and help out the situation. So for all these reasons, A, personal gratitude, B, shalom and the malchut, and C, if they're not really a person who is an idol worshiper, then it would be okay. For sure, someone who keeps all 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach would be okay, but in this case, I think Trump keeps 6 out of 7. I think the one with the adultery one he's not doing too well in. But al koparim, that's the psak that would be clear here. And over here, there's one factor that rides all and everything afterwards. When we finish, and we'll finish with this factor, is that if you think about it, you're not really davening for him. You're davening for ourselves. There's an idea of ashgacha, providence in general for goyim, an overall providence that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in the goyim, how many are supposed to be in this world, etc. And Jews have individual providence. But sometimes we can daven for goyim for our own individual providence, for our own sake. The davening for him has nothing to do with him per se. It has to do with us. The tefillot that we are doing is obviously for the sake of Eretz Yisrael, to save it. I'm not saying he's the Mashiach. I don't like when people bring all these gematrias about him being Mashiach. It's ridiculous and absolute stupidity, in my opinion. But at least we know that as our hishtadlut is to go ahead and try to help the situation as best as possible. And the other lady who's running is a harris, it's a complete destruction, a harris for everything that is going to be around, as we all are familiar with. And therefore, our proper hishtadlut, yes, maybe it's to vote, but like I said, it's kimat insignificant. Our votes, especially, I'm from Los Angeles, what's that going to do? Yeah, right. Or New York, it doesn't really do so much. How many live in the swing states? That can make the difference. Those votes are the most appropriate. However, our biggest vote is to daven to the Eibishter. Leiv malachim biyad Hashem. We know the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who decides, and he plays the puppet show here, especially with the leaders. They make none of their own individual decisions. We are just here to do our hishtadlut, and this is the power of the Jew, and we always have to appreciate the special koach, the special significance that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him. And therefore, I hold that you should vote for Mashiach ben David, because that's the real vote, and everyone should be davening for Mashiach to come, because besides what we're going through right now, we know that is the Iker of Ikrim.